Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? It is week 16. It's championship weekend. Can't believe it's finally here. I am in the championship in 3 of my leagues. Couldn't be more excited. This is a special week. There's no Thursday games, but we get 3 Saturday games. Got a whole lot of division games, including 2 of the 3 Saturday games are division games. So let's jump right into it. So we got the Rams at the 49ers. Both of these teams coming off of a loss last week. Gurley has had a roller coaster season, especially in the last 5 games. 3 games with over 100 total yards and then 2 games with under 60 yards combined, like last week versus Dallas. If I had Gurley this week, I'd make sure I have no other options. With Gurley playing the 3rd best run defense in the 49ers, and with the Rams so quick to abandon the run, I'd be very wary of Todd Gurley this week. Tyler Higbee has become a huge part of this Rams offense. 3 straight games with over 100 yards. He's seen 39 targets since week 11, 14 targets last week. And these aren't short slants and crossers. He's being targeted downfield. He's led the team in air yards over the last 3 weeks. Now, the first 2 games were against 2 of the worst teams at defending tight ends, Arizona and Seattle. Last week was pretty impressive to me versus the Cowboys, who were pretty much middle of the pack against tight ends. Although the Rams were down 24 points going into the 4th quarter, so the Rams needed to throw a lot. Brandon Cooks, 8 targets last week, most he's seen since week 4. He had more targets than Cooper Kupp, which I'm not very happy about. I got Cooper Kupp in a non-PPR league, and Cooks makes me very nervous about Kupp's target share here. But hopefully it was just the Rams being down so much and needing to throw a lot, and not necessarily being a sign of Cooks returning to a big portion of the target share. Robert Woods with one of his worst games ever, 17 yards on 9 targets. In week 6, he didn't catch any of his 4 targets, but he did score a rushing touchdown against the 49ers. So this should be an interesting rematch. I think Woods and Kupp are easy plays, and with what Higbee's been doing and how involved he's been, I think you can get away with playing him as well, although the 49ers are pretty tough against tight ends. They allow the 2nd fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but then again, Higbee's really not a traditional tight end. He's more of a 3rd wide receiver than anything else. Looking at the 49ers, the Rams allowed 260-plus rushing yards to Dallas last week. It was ridiculous. The 49ers ran for 100 yards in week 6 versus the Rams and rushed for over 100 yards last week. Yes, Kyle Shanahan is a offensive guru, which I think that term gets thrown around way too much. And yes, he loves drawing up fun pass plays, but if you think he doesn't want to run the ball 30-plus times with this stable of awesome running backs that he has, you're crazy. Mostert has taken the lead running back spot for sure, and rightfully so. He's got 4 straight games with a touchdown, 5 total touchdowns in the last 4 games. He's averaged just under 14 touches a game in those 4 games, and 7 yards a touch. So he's the man. I expect him to get the majority of the running back touches and play really well. He lost his first fumble of the year last week, so hopefully that's the first of only a few to for him to have. Hopefully he doesn't have any more this season. But last week was weird for the 49ers pass game. Deebo Samuel and Manny Sanders combined for 3 catches on 7 targets. Meanwhile, George Kittle had a monster game, 17 targets. He caught 13 of them for 134 yards. But it wasn't enough. They still lost by 7 to the Falcons. It's one of the bigger upsets of the year. George Kittle, he's going to be fine this week, but I am somewhat worried about playing either of these 49er wide receivers in the championship. Sanders is obviously the bigger name, but Debo has been the more consistent player. So, take your lumps with him if you want. All right, going to the Texans at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This, I think, FanDuel has this as the highest over-under of the week. If you've been getting by with Carlos Hyde as one of your running backs, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere this week. The Bucs are one of the best against running backs, allowing the fourth fewest receiving yards and the fewest rushing yards and the second fewest fantasy points overall to running backs, so it's a horrible matchup for him. Kenny Stills back-to-back drives in the second quarter with a red zone target, and he converted both of them for touchdowns. Hopkins still had his 100 yards. Will Fuller returned from his injury to second highest target share on the team, 5 catches for 61 yards. The Bucs give up the most fantasy points to wide receivers, so I think you can play any one of these three. Obviously, Hopkins is the main guy, but I think you can get away with either one of Stills or Fuller. Stills is used a lot, and Fuller's going to get those deep targets, and as we've seen with him before, it only takes one or two to connect, and you get yourself a 50, 60-yard touchdown, and there you go. There's 11 points. The Bucs also allow the fourth most fantasy points to tight ends, and although Darren Fells, I guess, trails only Mark Andrews in touchdowns among tight ends, he had a great matchup last week and caught only 1 of 2 targets for 2 yards. So I'm staying away. The Texans did not use either Darren Fells or Jordan Atkins last week, even though the Titans are also in the top 10 for as far as fantasy points allowed to tight ends. So I don't know how much you can trust this matchup. Looking at the Buccaneers, they are now down both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin with hamstring injuries. Even Scotty Miller is on IR with a hamstring issue. Sounds like Tampa Bay needs to hydrate and stretch a little bit more, but whatever. Rashad Perriman, Justin Watson, and Ishmael Hyman are that is one name right there that you're probably not going to hear again. Ishmael Hyman. It's the only wide receivers the Bucs are left with. The Bucs tight ends had 38% of the targets last week. O.J. Howard and Cam Brate each had 10% of the target share on the season. With all these injuries at wide receiver, I'm sure we're going to see a lot from these two tight ends this week. And the Texans, they do allow the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends. So I think the Buccaneers can keep up with the Texans, and I think this is going to be one of the more exciting games. Lots of fantasy points to go around in this one. The Texans also get beat up by running backs. They rank 9th in fantasy points allowed to running backs, but they give up the 3rd most receiving yards and the most receptions to running backs, which I think in this case matters a little bit more. You got to assume that these running backs are also going to be a lot more involved in the passing game. Last week, 6 running back targets between the 3 of them. I expect that to be closer to 10 or 12, to be honest. I'm excited to see what the Buccaneers do at home with Jameis Winston coming off of a 450-yard, 4-touchdown passing game. If Bruce Arians could only get this kid to stop throwing so many picks, he would be absolutely he would just be a beast because he can put up numbers, man. All right, and the last game for the Saturday slate here, another game I'm really excited about. It's the Bills at the Patriots. I remember watching the game between them in, week 8, I guess. It was a little early, week 4, I think. It was a great game, and if Josh Allen can protect the ball and play smart, the Bills should win this game like they should have won that game in week 4 when Josh Allen had 3 interceptions. He got sacked 4 times. He only completed 46% of his passes that day. I think Josh Allen's going to play a lot better in this game. At least I hope so. Devin Singletary with a solid game last week versus the Steelers defense, who was allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to running backs. He had 21 carries for 87 yards, averaged about 4 yards a carry. Let's see. He also was targeted 3 times, only caught 2 of them for 2 yards. Not all that great. And he did have a fumble. So hopefully he can clean that up. But Singletary didn't play in Week 4 when these two teams met, but Frank Gore did, and he had over 100 rushing yards in that game. He was the first of only 3 100-yard rushers allowed by the Patriots this season, the other 2 being Nick Chubb in Week 8 and Mark Ingram in Week 9. And Joe Mixon, I'm sorry, he also did it last week. So Ingram did it on 15 carries, Gore did it on 17, Chubb on 20, and Mixon on 25. So you got to give the guy the ball if you want to hit that mark for running backs against the Patriots. Since Week 11, Singletary has started every game for the Bills, and he's averaged 17.5 carries a game in those 5 games. He's at 5.5 yards per carry on the season, so if he hits his averages, he'll end the day with about 95 yards. So if they can get him closer to 20, like you saw last week, 21 carries, if they can get that, I think Singletary can give you that 100-yard game, give you that nice floor of 10 points, and then you're just hoping for a touchdown at that point. And, hey, against the Patriots, you'll take it, right? Looking at the wide receivers, so John Brown bounced back after 3 lackluster performances. He caught 7 of his 10 targets for 99 yards. Looking back at their Week 4 game, John Brown had 11 targets, and I don't know if Stephon Gilmore covered him on every play, but it seemed like it going back looking through the game log. Stephon Gilmore made the tackle on 4 of John Brown's 5 catches. So I'm going to assume that he did cover him the whole game. And, so the Patriots, I went back and I looked at all of the wide receivers that have faced the Patriots that kind of fit that John Brown mold, the smaller, fast speed guy, catches, deep passes. And I came up with a nice list of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 of these guys. Week 3, Robbie Anderson, only 3 catches on 5 targets for 11 yards. Again, in Week 7, Robbie Anderson, only 1 catch on 8 targets for 10 yards. So Stephon Gilmore really beat up Robbie Anderson this year. Marquise Brown did a little better, 3 catches on 4 targets for 48 yards. Will Fuller in Week 13 had 1 catch on 2 targets for 8 yards. Tyreek Hill in Week 14, 6 catches on 8 targets for 62 yards. And in Week 15, John Ross had 2 catches on 3 targets for 24 yards. So these speed receivers do not do well against the Patriots because Stephon Gilmore, he shuts you down, man. He's both physical and fast. He can keep up with the smaller, speedy guys, and he can also play up against the big guys like Amari Cooper. So I'm staying away from John Brown. I'm staying away from Cole Beasley. Honestly, I think I'm only going to roll with Devin Singletary in this matchup. I was rolling with Josh Allen in one of my leagues as a quarterback pretty much throughout the entire season, but unfortunately, my season is over in that league. Looking at the Patriots, the Pats have intercepted 25 passes this year, 6 more than the next highest team, including the 3 picks that they had against the Bills in Week 4. And the 4 picks that they had last week against the Bengals and Andy Dalton. The Patriots have won every single game that they've had multiple interceptions on. So, again, if Josh Allen can stay away from throwing those picks, this will be a much closer game. And I think the Bills can win this game if they can protect the ball. So Sony Michel, let's see. He had a pretty decent game last week with 89 yards. I doubt you made it to your championship game with Sonny Michel, but it's definitely not as a starter. But if you're hurting at running back this week and you need a desperation flex, the Bills have been beaten by more than a couple running backs. I went back and I looked at all the running backs that have faced the Bills this year. 5 running backs have averaged over 5 yards per carry, and 4 of them have averaged over 5.5 yards per carry. That being Saquon Barkley, Adrian Peterson, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, James Conner, Miles Sanders had a really good game against them as well. So the Bills can be beat on the ground, and with the Patriots passing game being what it is right now, I think the Patriots try and run the ball. I haven't looked at the over-unders for these games yet, but I am very much considering the under on this game. Two really good defenses, two offenses that have kind of been struggling a little bit. They're not as explosive as some other, the high-powered offenses out there. And and you look at the Patriots receivers, especially Mohamed Sanu and Julian Edelman combined for only 4 catches and 22 yards on 13 targets last week. It was Edelman's worst game since Week 8 of 2013. And I'm nervous. I know that was a mega disappointment. He's not going to play like that again. It's not going to be that bad. But in Week 4, he only had 4 catches on 7 targets for 30 yards. So I don't know how much of a rebound we can expect from him. I have Julian Edelman in a half PPR league championship game. Me and the other dude are the number 1 and number 2 seeds. So he's got a great team. And I'm nervous about Julian Edelman for sure, but I don't really have all that many other options. So I think I'm gonna have to roll out with Jules, as Tom Brady likes to say. So that does it for the 3 Saturday games. I'm going to get this out first thing in the morning. Make sure you guys get a full day to listen to this fantastic podcast here. And make sure you tune in for the NFC and the AFC home games I'm going to do. I think there's another 13 games. Half of them are NFC, half of them are AFC home games. So we'll get into all of those. Make sure you tune in for that. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.